Syima, welcome to this special interview for the RSA Journal.
And thank you for having me on.
For those that don't know, and most will, Syima is founder and artistic director of the Bradford Literature Festival. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that quite a bit, Syima, over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. Before we get to that, I'd love to hear a bit more about your background prior to that. So what drew you to Bradford? What drew you to arts and culture and literature?
I think a moment of insanity on both accounts. I think in terms of arts and culture, it's been a personal interest for a really long time. I was really lucky that I was brought up with books. So I've always been hugely interested in reading and books, and mainly fairy tales and fantasy. I'm all about the escapism. But I was literally brought up with that. I think maybe partially also because I'm an only child. So the books were my companions a lot of the time. But I think if I look back, the thing that probably really cemented my interest in terms of arts and culture and how that led to the Bradford Literature Festival was that so I'm second generation migrant to this country. My parents were first generation. And as anybody knows, anybody who knows anything about people migrating into a country, most people have this myth of return that they're always going to go back home. And my father was actually a little bit of a standing joke amongst his friends because his catchphrase was, well, there's no need to do X, Y, or Z because we're going to go back home. And the way that translated for me was that actually I spent the early years of my life going back home. Literally, my mother, when she was pregnant, went to Pakistan, and I was born in Pakistan because her family were there. And I came back to the UK when I was 4 months, went back when I was a year and a half. I came back when I was 2.5. I went to nursery, went back to Pakistan, and I was, and that was meant to be for good. We went when I was 5 years old, and then at 8 years old, lo and behold, we were back in the UK. But when I was in Pakistan, near where my father lives, because I used to go to school in a different area, every time I went home, there was a bookshop, and I would go there and buy these at the time 1 rupee fairy tales. And one of my abiding all my life sort of conversations with my mother had been the fact that I had this big collection. She left them behind when we moved to the UK. But when I came to the UK, I'd lost all my English. I went to a language centre, and I was there for 2 terms. I went to junior school at what would now be the end of year 4. And this probably illustrates where my English was, that because I got 98% at the end of year test in my maths and 34% in my English vocabulary. And the next year, my marks were 99%. And that is literally down to the fact that my mother took me to the library religiously every Saturday because she was determined I was going to make it. She was then told when we came back to the country, it doesn't matter where you live, just live in one place so she can actually get a consistent education. And we had family friends, and they said to her, right, she needs to pass the 11 plus because I grew up in Halifax, which still has grant-maintained schools and had the grammar school system at the time. And she was told, okay, what needs to happen now? She needs to go to the grammar school. So my mother very single-mindedly was then determined that this was going to happen. The friend that I grew up with, you are going to pass your 11 plus or else. I have no idea what else was, but for her that translated into taking me to the library. And I think that has really influenced, I loved it, but I used to I got to the point where I used to have to hide to read my books because my mum would be like, why aren't you reading your textbooks? Because once I get into a book, I get into a book. But I think that really influenced me in terms of setting up the Literature Festival, because I think I was really lucky I had that push. I had somebody who understood the importance of reading, and I have a very simplistic belief that education has the power to change lives, and that literacy is the absolute foundation stone of that. And that has been a very, very long answer to your very short question.
No, it's a great story, though. It's a great story. I think you've already started to answer my second question, really, which was on the Bradford Literature Festival. Where did the idea come from, and how did you make the idea a reality?
So the idea came because I think obviously I've said about my love of reading and how that influenced my education. My first job was actually in inward investment and regeneration in London. And that was really interesting from a point of view of what makes an area attractive for companies to invest in, but also how you retain companies. And my career, I hopped around a little bit, but I also have a background in data-led marketing strategies. But the last piece of work that I did before I set up the festival was actually looking at the sort of long-term strategies for the further education college in Bradford. And the thing that I was really struck by was, and Bradford, as some of you may know, is, and Andy, you will know this, youngest city in Europe, growing population. I think there's only 2 places in the country that have a growing population in this kind of way, but also has had the problems that it's had in terms of the race riots going back quite a long time now. And I think when I did that piece of work, having for my sins run a small business in Bradford, and I'd never run a small business before, having had this sort of corporate background, so I'd had a baptism of fire from that point of view. But it had actually meant that I had got to know the city in a way that I might not otherwise have experienced. But having done that work, having seen where Bradford was from a regeneration point of view, but also doing the work in the education sector, which made me realise that a lot of that population growth is coming from certain areas, and most of those areas have schools that are not doing terribly well. And I was looking at the jobs of the future that had been predicted by the West Yorkshire Economic Partnership, and I think I was just really struck by the fact that actually these kids were never going to get those jobs. They were never going to have the education attainment, which meant they would go into those jobs. And I felt, these are the things that mean that you end up with race riots and communities, not working together because certain communities are seen as problematic. So, lots of different things went into it, but I think also because Bradford is a really diverse city. And like I said, I grew up in Halifax, which is like a microcosm of Bradford. And I felt that actually if you talked about the issues that you could see when you stood in Bradford because of the number of communities in the city, we have over 150 languages spoken. And if you looked at the heritage of Bradford with all the successive migrations from Jewish German to the Eastern European, you could perhaps create something that would change narratives, bring people together. But the key driver for me was around children and young people. I'm really, really passionate about that. Well, I talked about the fact that I went to the grammar school, which still exists across the Heath. And I think the thing that's really stayed with me from that school was Asian parents have a real thing about maths. And I did really badly in my maths in my second year. And my mum, when she went to my parents' evening, and my mum doesn't speak English, so she would sort of go with the aid of a translator. She said to my maths teacher, does she need a tutor? And he said, no, it's fine. I'll give her some extra lessons. And he said to me, lovely gentleman, Mr. Hobley, and it's stayed with me all my life. He said to me, if you weren't intelligent, you wouldn't be here. If you don't understand, it's because we're not teaching you in the right way. And I really look back at that and I think how many children fall between the cracks because they're told they're not intelligent. And, and I saw this recently with my daughter who has ADD and dyscalculia, which is dyslexia for maths. And I was saying to one of my friends, I really experienced firsthand how somebody who's actually really intelligent, is, now at a really good university, et cetera, could have very easily fallen between the cracks. So again, a long-winded answer to the fact that actually, so the Bradford Literature Festival was, I suppose, set up as a social intervention. It is about arts and culture. I love arts and culture, but the key drivers, it's a cross-arts festival, really. But it is a literature festival because literacy is really, really important. And I felt that actually what children and people needed to see was that they could go to a literature festival and be included. Because I think the other side of it was that the other literature festivals I was going to had a very particular audience. And while they are great and they're important and I love them, the people in those rooms are actually already engaged. And the people who need to be hearing those conversations aren't there. And the children, young people there again, they have books, they're growing up with books, their parents are engaged, they're taking them to these events. And the children who actually need to be turned on to these things, that provision isn't there for them.
And tell me about the BLS journey then. So the first one, 2014, I think.
Yes.
tell me a bit about that, and then tell me a bit about where you are now, 2023, and how you've grown and how you've developed the festival over that 9-year window.
So 2014 was 2 days, 25 events. It was a complete, I'm not, I said, I'm not from the arts and culture world. I had no idea about festivals or creating festivals. I literally had this moment where I was like, oh, I know what we should do. I know what we should do in Bradford. We should have a literature festival because it will attract all these people and be great for the regeneration and inspire young people. So the 2014 was a marker in the ground. It was 2 days, 25 events. We had about 900 attendees who came to various things. And now in 2023, we are one of the largest festivals in the country. We just ran 678 events. We had 116,000 attendees. And it's been a really interesting, eye-opening journey for me. We're what's called the largest diverse-led cultural organisation in the north of England. So I think for me, coming into this sector and seeing the conversations and how they are framed has been a really interesting process. The festival, to my mind, is just common sense. So all the things that it does were done from a common sense point of view. So it has an education program because that's the way to engage young people who aren't part of who wouldn't normally be brought to a literature festival. It has an ethical ticketing policy because that's how you bring in people who are socioeconomically diverse. And for me, that's actually the most important thing. But yes, it's been an eye-opening journey. So 2015 was the first festival proper, 10 days, 135 events. And, over those 9 years, we've had over 550,000 audiences from over 30 countries. Our audience diversity averages at 54%. Our artistic diversity averages at about 44%. So we've had artists with roots in more than 72 countries, over 210,000 children, young people. So it's been really interesting. And I know that from the conversations that I've had, we've been seen as quite I suppose it's an innovative disruptor in the culture sector. But like I said, to me, most of the things that we do are just purely common sense.